welcome to Inner Peace Better Health, the show that holds space for growth, clarity, and transformation. I'm your host, Saima, and today's guest is phenomenal, Zipporah Jarmon, founder of Within Me Coaching, an empowerment and transition coach with a bold, healing presence. Based in Chicago and rooted in supporting BIPOC and queer clients, Zipporah's work is all about helping you tap into the power you already carry. Now, if you have ever felt stuck, lost, or on the edge of something new, this is a sign. You're not broken. The next step is already within you. So, Zifra, your coaching philosophy is so grounded in self trust. Why
Mhm.
do you believe life coaching is for everyone, not just executives or, people in crisis?
Yeah, first off, thank you for having me on your show. All of us deserve encouragement and support, right? I think there's, with executive leadership, people who have access to that are people who usually are already thriving at a top level. But everybody wants to thrive. Most people want a better life. Most people want to be happy or to be content or want to fulfill their goals, and don't actually know that they have options around support. I think we as humans deserve happiness and sureness and comfort. It should be a basic need and principle for us all to be supported and to gain the access of resources that help us along our path and our journey to become who we always are supposed to be. So I just deeply believe that, like, we don't have to sit in the predicament that we find ourselves in. We can strive towards goals. We can change our own lives. Um, and I think that sometimes coaching is offered to people who's already there versus focusing on people who want to get there.
Ah, that's remarkable. So, what kind of transformation have you seen when everyday folks start working with a coach?
Oh, yeah. I feel like the first thing is just that, like, change is such a human part of existence, right? Even when you think of being like a baby, someone who can't, feed themselves or walk or anything. And then one day they learn how to feed themselves. They learn how to walk. They learn how to talk. Change is part of life. So that's for the small things and the major things as well, right? Um, Remembering that change is just, it could be anything. So something that I've seen, at least with a lot of my transition clients, are that they are going through maybe a major change. I have a client who really wanted to work on confidence and what her identity is now that she was divorced. She had been with the same person for most of her life. They had a number of children together, and then she got a divorce, and she's like, "Oh my goodness, who am I?" She had this huge change that her identity was wrapped around her being married and her having kids, and then she wasn't married, and then she said, like, "Who am I?" So she really wanted to work on confidence and community building. And now she is part of a biking club. She bikes around her city. She has a lot of friends. She got her first job as an adult. Um, and now she's thriving, right? She really has to look inward and figure out, like, what do I need? What makes me happy? Because she never was asked that. She was a young person, fell in love, got married, had kids, and her identity was, I'm mom. Um, and so through the change of separation and divorce, she really had to look within and figure out, who am I? What do I want to do with my life? Who am I outside of a mom? Right. And that's one of my favorite stories. Because to look at her a year and a half ago and to look at her today, she even has like a pretty big social media following, just sharing her life. And so she went from being really alone and secluded and not really know who she was to having this great community in her city and then being able to reach and touch the lives of people all over the world through her social media.
That shift from fixing to unfolding is what makes coaching so radically empowering, right?
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I think that, you know, something that I think about a lot is that like this is my first time living this day at this age in my life, right? You might meet someone who is elderly and maybe in their 80s. That's their first time being an 80-year-old. None of us have the key, but I do believe that like I know myself. I believe that you know yourself, right? My clients, I trust that they know themselves better than anyone else. And so using their lived experience to help them map out tangible steps towards who they want to be, what they want to do, is crucial to the work that I do. Believing people, knowing that they have everything within them to succeed. And my job is to just ask them the right question, tease it out of them, and say, okay, so here's the action step. And in 2 weeks, we'll see what we do, how we do in these next couple of weeks. So it's really beautiful to see people look within and also start trusting themselves to make the changes they want to see in their lives.
That's remarkable. Now, you specialize in transition coaching. So, what does it mean to support someone through life's in between phases?
Yeah, it's something I stumbled across when I was first doing training to become a coach. Um, I stumbled across somebody who was going through a big change or transition. Um, Part of transition coaching is to learn and acknowledge where the person is today and where they want to go. What's the change? Is it a change that they want to have within themselves? So, for example, the client who was divorced and was trying to figure out who she was, right? The change was divorce, and the action now is who am I? Who do I want to be? What do I need to do to get there? But sometimes change and transition is might look like I'm starting a family. I'm anticipating a change, right? I'm gonna start a family. What do I need, right? Or I've been sick for a really long time, and now I'm getting the help that I want. So I went from a space of being sick, and now I'm stable. What does life look like now? Because so much of my life identity has been a sick person for X amount of time, right? So really hearing where people are right now, where they're coming from, and where they want to go, is really important because whatever the transition is that they're either anticipating or moving through is the foundation of the work that we're doing, right? It's like almost like ground zero, right? So, okay, now the dust is settled, what are we doing? Where are we going? Um, so yeah, with transition coaching, it's really just about where the person is, what change has happened or are they anticipating to happen, or what change are they moving through, right? Again, change, especially in our lives as humans, as living anyone, change happens like that, right? So what do you do in the midst of change?
hmm So, it's like, what's one thing people often get wrong or fear about change?
Mm, I think something that I wouldn't say that people get wrong, but something that people don't realize around change is that you have autonomy. You can have a hand in change, even if it feels like change that, is so far away. So, for example, I live in the United States. We have an administration here that took office on January 20th, which left a lot of people feeling powerless, left a lot of people feeling scared, left a lot of people not knowing how this change will impact their lives. And that's something that feels like you don't have autonomy, right? There's a new administration who's in office, and all the things they're doing is scary. What can you do today that shows that you have autonomy? right? That might mean going on the streets and protesting. That might mean going to your neighbor who, might be struggling and might need, some food and bringing over lunch, right? Your community member who is in need. We all can make change happen, right? And so a big misconception is that change just happens to us. And that's not always the case. And it's not always the case that you don't have autonomy in change. We make things change all the time. You're just not aware of it. So that's a huge misconception. Just that, like, something big is happening, I have to sit here and take it. That's not true, right? So, like, a few questions I did a video on this a few months ago, around November, which is when that administration was elected into office. Of here are 5 things you can ask yourself to see the autonomy you have in yourself. So, like, one, what is something you can do right now to make a difference? Right. Two, what do you have control over? Right. Like, those are two. I can't think of all of the questions, but a huge misconception is that change just happens to us. And we don't have the ability you know, to make things better for ourselves. It's not true. Just have to remember that, hey, there's something I can do. I might not know what that is, right? I might need to talk to a coach. I might need to talk to a family member, a loved one, but none of us, it's not super often that we have no autonomy to make things better or to make an impact in our lives or in our community lives.
So real. It's like change isn't always comfortable, but it's often where we finally meet ourselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love change. I think it shows the resilience we have as people. I think without change, we would always be stagnant, right? That newborn baby, if that newborn baby never learns how to walk or learns how to, something, right? Like, okay, we don't just leave that baby to just like never learn how to walk, right? Or never learn how to talk, right? There's resources, right? Parents might say, "Hey, my kid's not talking, my kid's not walking. What's happening?" Right? We are creatures of change. And even if the reason for change isn't a good or ideal reason, um, we can always change to make our situation better in some capacity.
Absolutely. Now, your work deeply supports BIPOC and queer communities. So, why is
Yes.
culturally competent coaching like so essential in this space?
It's so essential. It's the same reason, kind of, to our earlier point of, coaching is often offered to people on executive leadership level. Um, Everyone should have access to coaching, because coaching is a tool that helps you look forward in making plans to make your life better, right? So when we talk about disparities and lack of resources, at least, I am pretty sure that, I just across, you know, a lot of different, whether it's cities, countries, BIPOC people, brown people, black people, are often the last people to get resources, especially in the United States. And then you add additional marginalized identities or intersections, such as being a queer person, a person who is in the LGBTQ community, then the access to resources continue to drop, right? And so, one, is important because my work is to support these communities who are often left outside of the conversation or aren't considered at all. Um, Partially because, like, that's my experience, right? I am a Black queer person from Chicago. And I remember, being a kid and watching TV and looking for maybe a representation of a adult I could grow up and be like, right? Or see myself in someone. And I never saw that. The only show I could recall seeing of someone who looked like me or had a experience that was similar to me was Boys Don't Cry, which was about a trans white kid in Indiana who some really terrible things happened to. And so me as a black kid, I didn't have all I had was that person who had not many identities that I had from my, that I aligned with. And so I hold that experience really dear to my heart because there's a lot of things that I didn't have that I am trying to pour back into my community. Resources, ideas, creativity, just making sure that like they have the things that they should have always had. Um, yeah, executive leadership, I'm sorry, coaching should not only be for executive people. It should be for people who are looking towards their future and trying to make a change in their life. And for me, it's extremely important to provide this really powerful and valuable resource to the people who are usually last to be considered.
Mm-hmm. So, how can more coaches and listeners show up allies and advocates in like meaningful ways?
Mm, yeah, that's a great question. One of the most simple ways to show up is by having inclusive language, or even just maybe a badge on your website to say like we support or we service LGBTQ plus folks, or that like something that I think is really important is just inclusive language. Maybe not saying, "Hey, ladies and gentlemen," right? "Hey, listeners," right? Like there's a difference of like, okay, what if someone is trans or non-binary and they don't identify as, a man or a woman? Instead of that person listening or reading and saying, okay, it just says men and women, I'm already excluded out, right? So then they're coming to these companies for help or support or wanting to give their money, and the first thing they see is that this company don't even think of them, don't even consider them, right? Like going back to this piece of consideration. Um, so an easy first step is inclusive language, and acknowledgement, right? Acknowledgement is, I think, the second piece to it. Like depending on the company, the partners, who they're focusing on. I think that acknowledgement around like what's happening maybe in this country in the world or get into certain demographics might be important, right? I think a great example of that is like Ben and Jerry's. Ben and Jerry's sell ice cream, but you know that they care about BIPOC people, they care about queer people, but they care about human rights, right? Somebody might look at another ice cream company who don't say anything about inclusion or marginalized people, and they want to spend their money there because they love that ice cream. But Ben and Jerry's talk about all these things, right? And it doesn't always have to be in an overt way, but that's why I kind of say like even having inclusive language, by having inclusive language, you're bringing more people into the conversation, even if you don't know it. And that's a great way to start.
Mm-hmm. That's a truth bomb. Healing like can't happen in spaces where we don't feel seen. Thank you for naming that.
Yeah, yeah. And that's just like part of my experience too, right? Like, um, a lot of my life in some capacity, I'm not seen or considered, right? Because of the identities I hold. Um, and so I've always felt more welcome when I see inclusive language, just because that company decided to, say, "Hey everyone," or "Hey group, welcome." It's really in those small details that make feeling included happen.
Mm-hmm. So, empowerment coaching is a big part of what you do, right? So, how do you help clients like go from self doubt to self trust?
Yeah, that's such a great question. One, I like to ask my clients, what's in your way? right? So usually they might use a word that's like, uh, I'm just gonna give an example of, um, I see other people doing this thing, but I could never do it. What's holding you back? What's different between you and them, right? And usually at some point, a client might start realizing that the only thing between them and someone else is the barrier that they put in front of them, in front of their own face, right? A really nice tool that I like to do with some clients who's kind of in that rut is that I will have them, ex- talk about their self doubt, you know, and then talk about, maybe someone they admire. And then I start reading back the words they say about themselves and the words they say about someone else who have the same credentials. And then they start to hear, oh my goodness, I said that. Wow, that's not actually that different. Like um I'm not actually that far behind them. Oh, I'm the person who's holding me back. So then once they have this realization that it's not necessarily that they are ill-equipped or not smart enough or good enough, it's just that they've put a door in front of their face. Once we can kind of get to that point where they're like, "Oh, it's me. I'm the person in the way." Then we start to build on like, "Okay, well, what do you want, said thing to look like? What does it look like for you to feel um confident? What does confidence mean to you?" And then we start building upon ideas of what's confident, what makes you feel confident, right? And so then with a client who has now identified what makes them feel confident, now we're looking for experiences or examples or just things in everyday life that they can do to feel that feeling, right? And so now they're slowly building their confidence. So go from this place of self doubt and usually looking at other people, realizing that there's not much of a difference between me and that person, but just me, putting my own barrier in my face. Now I know there's a barrier here. Okay, let's acknowledge it, and now let's build on top and just say, okay, this is what confidence look like. This is what empowerment looks like. What Here are ways for me to access that. Here are ways for me to take chances in my real life to build upon that, right? Something that I find that is really common is that we are the only people on our way. We are usually the only people on our way.
Mm.
So that's kind of usually the structure I try to go through, and every client is different. It might not necessarily look like that every time, but often that's a route that I'll go with the client.
Ah, that's noteworthy. So, what does that first breakthrough often look like?
Oh, my favorite. One of my favorite breakthroughs
Mm-hmm.
is that I will ask somebody a question. And it's usually a question they don't want to answer. Um, and it's not because let me back up. It's usually there's a look someone gets. So, say we're talking about something, let's say it's about self doubt, and then I ask them a very specific question. I don't have an example right now, but what will happen is that the client figures out, oh, I know the answer to this question, but I don't want to admit it to myself, right? And sometimes I think we all experience this. There's these pesky little thoughts in the back of our head that we don't want to say out loud. So we are being avoided about it. We keep pushing it to the back, keep pushing it to the back. And so I'll ask somebody a question, and the answer is that thing they've been pushing, pushing, pushing. And they make this face. And it's always like, I don't want to admit this to myself. And then when they admit it to themselves, then it breaks open, almost like if you open a door and it's a whole new world, right? And then that's where the work begins.
That's the glow we actually don't talk about enough, the internal one, right?
Yeah. We are
Absolutely.
all, yeah, we're I think we always, and again, that's why we go back. My philosophy is everybody has what's within them to thrive, because you know what the thing is usually. It's just admitting it to yourself. Once you can admit what it is, then that's again where the work begins, because now, right, the barrier that has been you holding yourself back might have just been that admission. And now that you've freed yourself of that, you can move forward and make tangible change.
Exactly. Zipra, thank you for sharing, for bringing your fierce, creative, and grounded wisdom to this space. And to all our listeners, you don't need to fall. You don't need to wait until you're falling apart to ask for support. You are worthy of guidance now. So take the next step, trust yourself, and remember everything you need is already within you. And Zipra, your soul is in bloom. Keep spreading light and wisdom, and I will be delighted to have you back on the show for another conversation.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me here. If anybody is curious more about coaching, my website is withinmecoaching.com. Instagram is also within me coaching. The questions have been immaculate. Thank you for your calming and supportive energy. And it's been so beautiful to have this time and just to share more about my philosophies around coaching.